Now, there are two main types of variables. Firstly, there is independent variable, and secondly, there is dependent variable. So, what is independent variable? Independent variables are any variable that essentially are actively manipulated by the experimenter and only the experimenter. The dependent variable, on the other hand, is the variable which is assumed to be dependent upon the independent variable. In other words, dependent variables are variables that change as a function of the changes in independent variables. Let's understand these concepts a little better with an example of a memory study. Suppose you are designing a study wherein you want to discern the changes in the number of items recalled and the recall accuracy of those items when participants are subjected to a memory-specific training versus a non-memory training group. So for this study, for example, you have recruited a population of participants. You then randomly allocate these participants to two different groups, which is memory training versus a non-memory training group, which in this case could be spatial skills training. Note that at this stage you haven't actively subjected any participants in either of these groups to any type of training. You have just divided them. The participants are then given a task wherein they have to study and learn two different lists. In list 1, the participants have to learn 12 pairs of names and faces, and in list 2, the participants are instructed to learn different cities and famous cuisine or dishes found in those cities, and 12 pairs of them as well. Following this, the participants from both the groups are subjected to a pre-training measure or a pre-training test, wherein we subject them to a recall test, a memory recall. So let's look at some mock data that has been generated for the recall tests across the two groups. Remember that the participants in each of these groups have not been subject to any active training yet, and therefore we are getting a pre-training measure of their performance in the recall test. Also remember that we are interested in two key measures of interest, which is the number of items recalled and the recall accuracy performance. So here we have the mock data for the two groups, and we observe that the performance of each of the groups does not differ that much in either of the recall accuracy or the items recalled. Now we subject the participants in each of the groups to active training sessions. In the memory training, the participants learn about different strategies to better encode, store, and retrieve and recall information. So in other words, they get better in their memory capacities. And in the spatial skills group, they learn how to better their spatial skills that has got nothing to do with their memory at all. Following this active training, the participants retake the recall test, and then we account for their post-training measures. Let's look at some mock data of the post-training measures. Here we have some mock data for the post-training, and we observe that the memory training group has done fairly well in both the number of items recalled as well as the recall accuracy as compared to the spatial skills training group. So let's try to pause the video for a second and try to name the independent and the dependent variable in this study to test our knowledge. I hope you have paused the video and tried to test your knowledge. Let's look at the answers. So the independent variable in this example study was the type of training session the participants were subjected to, because this was actively manipulated by the experimenter or the researcher. The dependent variable, on the other hand, was the number of items recalled and the recall accuracy, because these aspects were dependent on the type of training session the participants were subjected to. So hopefully that consolidates your understanding of independent and dependent variables.